Jim Rohn had a way of speaking that made you feel both gently challenged and profoundly encouraged, as if he were reminding you of truths you already knew deep down but had forgotten along the way. His lessons were simple but never simplistic. They carried the weight of lived experience. With his calm voice and his sharp humor, he taught something essential. Your life is built, not in giant leaps, but in small, consistent decisions repeated over time. Life doesn't get better by chance, he said. It gets better by change. And in this video, we will explore how Jim Rohn uncovered the power of discipline, attitude, and habit, and how his teachings can transform the way you approach your future. Rohn's story begins in rural Idaho, where he was born in 1930 to a humble farming family. His parents worked hard, lived modestly, and instilled in him a deep sense of responsibility. Yet Jim was not born a prodigy. By his mid-20s, he was broke, discouraged, and working long hours at a job that barely paid the bills. What changed his life was not luck, but mentorship. When he met Earl Schoaf, a charismatic businessman and philosopher, his world shifted dramatically. Schoaf didn't hand Rohn money, opportunities, or shortcuts. He handed him a new way of thinking. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job, he told him. Those words would become the foundation of Jim Rohn's life philosophy. What made Jim Rohn different from other motivational speakers was his emphasis on discipline. Not discipline as punishment, but discipline as self-respect. He believed that every action, no matter how small, is a seed, and that your future depends on the seeds you choose to plant. He used the metaphor of the 4 seasons to explain that life is cyclical. There will be winters of hardship, summers of growth, and springs of opportunity. You cannot avoid the seasons, but you can learn to work with them. The tragedy, Rohn said, is that many people die with their potential unopened because they wait for perfect circumstances. His solution was simple. Start with what you have, where you are, and move forward consistently. One of Rohn's most famous teachings is what he called the ant philosophy. He admired ants because they never quit, never complain, and always prepare. If blocked in one direction, they simply try another, and another, and another still. Rohn used this example to illustrate resilience. You don't need overwhelming strength. You need persistence. Ants don't think small because the world is big. They think big because the world is uncertain. They gather in summer to survive the winter. They move with purpose, not panic. Through this metaphor, Rohn taught that the difference between success and failure often comes down to how long you are willing to keep going after things get hard. Rohn also believed that attitude shapes destiny. For him, attitude wasn't superficial positivity. It was the lens through which you interpret reality. You can face a challenge and see an obstacle, or face the same challenge and see an opportunity. The situation may be identical, but the outcome changes depending on how you choose to think. Rohn argued that this shift begins with language. The way you talk about your life becomes the story you live in. If you use the language of limitation, I can't, I never, I don't know how, you build invisible walls around your potential. But if you adopt the language of possibility, the mind opens, the heart expands, creativity awakens. One of the most powerful parts of his philosophy was personal responsibility. Rohn would say, "You can't change the wind, but you can adjust the sails." Many people live as if their circumstances define their fate. But Rohn emphasized that while you may not control the external world, you always control your response to it. When you stop blaming, you reclaim your power. He encouraged people to keep a journal, not just as a record of events, but as a tool for self-awareness. In writing your thoughts, your goals, and your lessons, you turn your life into a conscious project. You stop drifting and start navigating. Rohn also taught that success is not something you pursue. It is something you attract by the person you become. If you want better opportunities, become the kind of person who is ready for them. If you want deeper relationships, become more caring, more attentive, more courageous. If you want financial stability, develop habits that reflect respect for money. Rohn believes self-improvement is the highest form of generosity because it allows you to contribute more to others. When you grow, everyone around you benefits: your family, your colleagues, your community. Personal development is not selfish, it is service. A recurring theme in his teachings is the importance of reading. Rohn was convinced that books are the gateway to worlds you could never reach physically. He recommended reading for at least 30 minutes every day, not for entertainment, but for elevation. He believed that a mind nourished with ideas is a mind that makes better decisions. Books, he said, are reminders that your life can change in a single paragraph. And when those ideas mix with action, they become engines of transformation. Rohn's advice about goal setting is perhaps his most iconic contribution. He believed goals give your life direction, purpose, and meaning. But he also warned that vague goals produce vague results. His advice was precise. Write your goals down, make them specific, review them regularly, and let them shape your daily decisions. A goal is not a dream, it is a commitment. It sharpens your focus and becomes a filter for your choices. The question, does this move me closer to my goal, is a compass that can guide an entire life. Rohn taught that you are always moving, either toward your goals or away from them. One of his most profound observations is that you become like the people you spend time with. Rohn coined the famous line, "You are the average of the 5 people you associate with most." He wasn't suggesting that you abandon people, but that you consciously choose your influences. If you surround yourself with pessimism, you absorb it. If you surround yourself with progress, you accelerate. He urged people to seek out those who uplift them, challenge them, and help them grow, not through pressure, but through example. Who you spend time with is one of the quietest and most powerful forms of self-development. But Rohn was also honest about failure. He believed failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. Every mistake contains a lesson, and every setback teaches you something about resilience. He compared failure to fertilizer, unpleasant, but necessary for growth. When you learn from your failures, they become stepping stones. He cautioned against taking failure personally. You are not the event, he said. You are the person who grows from the event. With this mindset, failure becomes an ally instead of an enemy. Applying Jim Rohn's teachings doesn't require dramatic reinvention. It simply requires consistency. Start by choosing one small discipline, a daily habit that aligns with the future you want to create. It could be reading for 10 minutes, exercising briefly, saving a tiny amount of money, practicing gratitude, or reviewing your goals. Over time, these small actions compound. Rohn believed that the compounding effect of habits is one of life's greatest miracles. What begins as a routine becomes a lifestyle. What begins as a choice becomes a character. As we reflect on Jim Rohn's legacy, we see a philosophy rooted not in complexity, but in clarity. His message was that anyone, regardless of background, education, or circumstance, can build a meaningful life by committing to small, intentional improvements. He believed that discipline builds confidence, confidence builds action, and action builds results. Rohn's voice continues to echo across generations because he didn't just teach success, he taught responsibility, dignity, and integrity. And now, as we close this extended reflection, I leave you with the question Jim Rohn would have wanted you to ask yourself. What small discipline can you start today that will transform your life 1 year from now? Write it in the comments. Every great life begins with a single intentional decision for a more easy life.